watching Buzz with Jess Lujan.
Hey, we're back with Rebecca and Dennis, of course, 2 of 6 children of Lourdes Laguana Paris, featured in Real Faces, soon to be released. Again, World War II survivors, most especially here in Guam. And her story, again, as we were talking, is indicative again of the climate there in Guam at the time. Your mom's story, your dad. You said your dad hardly spoke about it. But in your mom's story, do you remember your dad and his nightmares and his remembrance or his whenever he recounted again the atrocities?
He was he would speak vaguely of a lot of things, and then he would keep quiet and he would just sit there and stare. But just really, I couldn't really talk to him about any stories. So like if I asked him to say, Dad, because I would talk to his father, Pa, right? Pa would tell me some things about how they would, act in the jungle, and then I'd go to my dad and try and verify that. Hey, Dad, Pa said this, and he'll kind of go around the issue like, oh yeah, well, Pa did that for us because we were family, and he won't really exactly explain it. So I knew it would bother him. Then my mom used to tell me about his nightmares. I didn't think anything of it. I was just still young at that time.
Yeah.
So and of course they kept a lot of things from us.
Sure. And over the years now, I mean, your mom's story featured here, and did you have an opportunity to look at the draft yet at this point?
Yes, yes, I did. Yes,
overall,
yes,
with
overall,
everybody's
yes,
comments
yes.
and things like that. And so did your mom? I mean, what else did your mom tell you about those times?
Well, she remembers she remembers her father planting things and having to hide meat, and how they were very afraid of the Japanese finding them. And she just spoke a lot about they could not show emotion when they were forced to watch people get their heads cut off or be punished or whipped. And if they showed any amount of emotion, they would get punished too. And as an 11-year-old or 15-year-old, she was just terrified. And I also remember her saying to me, I don't like to watch any movies about the war. And that really struck a chord with me because I never lived through a war, but she did at a very, very young age. And I was just thinking how she must have been terrified, and yet she had to be responsible because she was the oldest girl. And
how was her reaction? Because back then we remember the Yokoi, the finding of Yokoi, and all that, and of course the elders at the time he was very lucky that his life wasn't taken because it was still very fresh, and I mean our grandparents and even our parents were alive then. How it has changed, of course. Our parents say these are not the same Japanese that were bad, but how was their taking to that when we started getting into our main industry basically was tourism, and most especially from Japan. How did they take that initially?
I think in our culture we're very forgiving people, and I don't remember my parents ever saying anything bad about the tourists and we shouldn't be doing this because of what they did to us. I never ever heard that. I think, like you said, it was a different time, it was a different people, and even a different culture back then, where the Japanese back then were just all about war. They were never afraid of death, so it didn't bother them to torture our people. But because this is a new generation and a new era, they don't really think badly about the Japanese anymore. They have their memories, they have their nightmares, but they don't hold it against the people now because they understand that this is a different life. Now,
it was just last week, again, our efforts over the years, and obviously your mom's testimony is a testament of the fact that she put out her testimony. As we continue to try to get war reparations. It was just last week where the Senate rejected again the clause for war reparations. It meant a lot to your mom, to have some kind of closure, not necessarily the money issue.
No.
It's closure, coming to closure. What did you share about war reparations with you folks?
it's almost like a night and day. Some days she really be very aggressive on, yeah, we should get something. But then other days she's the typical chamorro day, pola, that kind of let it go, bygones be bygones and all that. But I don't know, there wasn't any clear-cut answer she was searching for. But yeah, you're right, it's a closure.
Yeah.
She's looking for something. I could never figure it out.
Yeah.
My dad was fine. I mean, he was fine, but he dealt with his own way. But I guess with mom's I don't know. Sometimes she's difficult to read.
Well, it seemed like she was mostly concerned about the land taken away from her father, and she
You guys-
really wanted that back.
Tijan were you guys'
Yeah,
property?
Tijan, yes,
right.
yeah. She really talked a lot about
Sure,
that.
yeah,
That was my
yeah.
father's land. We should get it back.
Yeah.
And
Right.
she was mostly concerned about the land rather than money,
Sure.
because that was precious
Sure,
to her.
sure.
And she wanted to pass it down maybe to her kids or grandkids, but she doesn't have it.
Yeah. Tijan, what part of Tijan? I mean, were you ever were there any close to compensation? I mean, because are you in the runway?
No. Yes, from what I can
Yeah.
remember, I think part of it was
Part
the
of the runway.
runway.
The
Yeah,
bull-
so
she keeps saying the bull cart trail. So yeah, and you have to understand that's where they spend most of their childhood.
Sure.
And that's the most intense memories that they have of
Sure.
their childhood.
Yeah.
Growing up, and that's almost like something that they lost.
Sure.
Yeah.
Entirely part of their life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I don't know really how she would feel if they, I really don't know. But
Yeah.
that's something that she really wanted. That
Yeah, and it was closure. Again, the money is not going to
Right.
erase your memories and all
No.
that, but
Yeah.
some kind of closure to something. I mean, now again, when I'm reading your mom's story, your dad waking up in nightmares, and it's almost on a nightly basis that this will happen. It's just like, she told the story like it was he was reliving this. The nightmares were almost like it's happening right now.
Yes.
It's almost like it's just yesterday, and I'm sure again that's why Dad didn't really want to talk about. He wanted to get out of his mind, and this is something again that I guess we've learned as a Chamorro. We're forgiving, but we're also resilient in a sense that we just have to live with it. I mean, now if he was going through this, he would be diagnosed as PTSD.
Probably, yeah.
But I'm sure that if he had the opportunity, like my mom did, in order to share experiences, I'm sure he would.
He would have
This would be
shared
good therapy for him.
Yes,
Yeah,
therapy,
because this was very good therapy for my mom.
Yeah.
I mean, this really
Yes.
brought her alive. I mean, it was just you see a big difference in
Yeah.
her. She was just 180-degree turn, man.
Yeah. So
really
I
is.
mean, you feel again this is part of her closure as well.
Exactly.
Part of
Yeah,
her
could
part of her
be, yes.
therapy, I guess,
Part
right?
of
Part of therapy.
Yeah.
I mean, she was very.
Yeah, yeah. And so she shared stories with you as well as watching people who were killed and beheaded and all that. And
Yes,
I've got callers as well and reading stories here of kids at the time. 6, 7-year-old
Right.
who watched the beheading of people,
Right.
and they were told you cannot show any emotion.
Right,
Exactly.
right.
You cannot cry. You cannot
Right.
show that you're scared, because if you do, you're going to be the next one, or your family members. I mean, you work in a hospital setting. You're a dietitian, but you know how that can affect people. I mean,
Yes.
looking at
Yes,
that,
yeah.
and geez, but our parents turned out good.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you look at them and they're like just the pillars of everything.
Sure, sure.
Where there are models, there are heroes, there are everything, and
Uh-huh.
and to think that they went through that as a child. I mean,
Yeah.
how could
Sure.
I would never could think. I mean, I don't know. I'd probably be in pieces if I ever went
Sure,
through it.
sure.
But you have to admire them and uncle, man.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, those guys went through a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that's why you have to, it makes you feel good.
And also when you look at the times when reading your mom's story, and of course she was brought up by 3 aunts,
Yes.
and she said her dad never spanked them. When it comes down to that you did something really wrong,
Yeah.
okay? He never spanked them, but he was stern, and he was strict.
Yes.
And of course, going through all that, I'm sure he was very possessive of his kids at the time as well, right? But when I guess when one of her aunts told her about I guess in this the titijas, right?
Yes,
yeah.
And one thing that sticks out here says, and my dad said, quit, or quit trying to discipline her,
Right, right.
She's only 11.
Yes.
She's only 11. And she took that. I mean, this is something that when she's 11 years old, all until, until, how old was she when
She
she passed?
remembered that.
Yeah, she remembered.
She was 83.
83.
Yeah,
This is the one thing she took all the way. And she
Yes.
said, my dad loved me.
Yes.
He stood up for me.
Yeah.
I mean, because of course at the time, right?
Sure.
We have strict parents. They're
Right.
stern and all that.
Right.
I mean, it's those are the times. Nowadays we greet each other with kissing each other and things like that. Back then it wasn't. Really, the times were different. But as a kid, to remember that, and that must have been the gold medal for her.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah,
my dad stood up for me.
Well, she always talked about how a lot of responsibility was on her
Was on
because
her,
she was
yeah.
the oldest girl.
At 11.
At 11. And she had 3 older sisters who died before the war,
Yeah.
so everything was on her.
Yeah.
She had to watch the younger one, she had to watch the older one, she had to watch her mother.
Yeah.
Even she had to, make sure her mother was okay.
yeah.
And of course, the 3 aunts were, I think, running the household. And they were on her all the time, not realizing that she's just a child. They wanted her to do everything right, but she was just a child, and her father remembered that and protected her.
There you go.
So that's something you never forget.
Reminds me of Snow White. Those stepmothers, right? Hey, we're going to pay some bills and we'll be right back.